Welcome to Friends in Fiction, 5 best-selling authors, endless stories. Friends in Fiction is a podcast with 5 best-selling novelists whose common love of reading, writing, and independent bookstores bound them together. With chats, author interviews, and fascinating insider talk about publishing and writing, these friends discuss the books they've written, the books they're reading now, and the art of storytelling. If you love books and you're curious about the writing world, you're in the right place. Best-selling novelists Mary Kay Andrews, Kristen Harmel, Christy Woodson Harvey, Patty Callahan Henry, and Mary Alice Monroe are 5 longtime friends with more than 80 published books to their credit. At the start of the pandemic, they got together for a virtual happy hour to talk about their books, their favorite bookstores, writing, reading, and publishing in this new uncharted territory. They're still talking, and they've added fascinating discussions with other best-selling novelists. So join them live on their Friends and Fiction Facebook group page every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern, or listen and view later at your leisure. Welcome to Friends in Fiction. We are 5 best-selling novelists and friends. Our common love of reading, writing, and independent bookstore binds us together. I'm Mary Alice Monroe, and my latest novel is On Ocean Boulevard.
And I'm Mary Kay Andrews. My latest novel is Hello Summer.
I'm Kristen Harmel. My latest novel is the upcoming The Book of Lost Names, which will be out in just a couple weeks.
Yeah.
I'm Christy Woodson Harvey, and my latest novel is Feels Like Falling.
And I'm Patty Callahan Henry, and my latest novel was Becoming Mrs. Lewis.
And we are all delighted tonight to welcome a favorite author of all of us and most of the world, Delia Owens.
Well,
Delia, welcome.
Yay!
Delia.
Thanks for having me here.
Delia is the author of the blockbuster Where the Crawdads Sing. This novel has taken the literary and publishing world by storm. It has broken all records and continues to stun the book world with its unceasing popularity. 96 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list, half of those 12 months and more as #1, and a bestseller on 4 continents. At the end of the year roundup for 2019, Where the Crawdads Sing had sold more print copies than any other adult fiction title that year, fiction and nonfiction. I'm thinking by half, and it's still going strong. Fun fact, Merriam-Webster added crawdad to the list of the top 10 words of 2019. I think that's hysterical. Y'all should know, y'all should know this just doesn't happen every day. Even saying all these words, I have to blink in disbelief. But no author writes in a vacuum. And Delia is a shining example of how one can use one's education, one's work, one's personal experiences, and bring them all to the page. Delia, or I should say Dr. Owens, received her BA in zoology from the University of Georgia and her PhD in animal behavior from the University of California. She married a fellow grad student, Mark Owens, and together they sold everything they had and headed to Botswana, Africa, where they were the only 2 people, except for a few bands of roving bushmen in an area the size of Ireland. Their book, Cry of the Kalahari, is a vivid account of their experiences there. They continued in their wildlife research in Zambia, where their work focused on elephants. The Eye of the Elephant details their work and their experiences to reclaim the wilderness from brutal commercial poachers. In all, Delia conducted research on endangered species in Africa for 23 years. And in addition to her nonfiction books, she published her research in scientific journals. So, with experiences like that to draw upon, is it any wonder her novel has unparalleled resilience in publishing? So, Delia, welcome to this strong female pack.
Thank you. You make a great troupe. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we began Friends in Fiction in April when we were all seeking connection and sheltering in place. And since then, we've been asking our guests How have you been dealing with the last several months? So we'd like to know, Delia, how have you been dealing with sheltering in place these last few months?
Actually, I've been staying up in the mountains of North Carolina, which is a great place to isolate. And it's, but I have spent much of my life in isolation. When we were in the Kalahari, as you said, we were the only two people in an area the size of Ireland. And I spent much of the time in the Luangwa all by myself in my own camp. So I've spent a life of isolation. So I'm used to it in a way, but I've also learned how it can adversely affect you. We have the genetic propensity to belong to a troop, especially women, because most mammals live in female groups. And so when you are isolated, it changes you and you're affected. That's the reason we do need to reach out for programs like this. You shouldn't just isolate. You should always stay in contact with your friends and do what you can to be part of a group as much as you can.
That's really good advice. I think that we felt reassured by seeing each other. And I think the response to Friends in Fiction, which is going out every week, sort of imitates what you just said, that we are, or echoes what you just said, that we are reaching people and bringing them together. Don't you all think so?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, Mary Kay, how have you been this last week?
Busy, writing. Today I killed someone.
You love to do that.
Fictionally. So my body count is only at 1, which is, pretty
Not
pathetic.
bad.
Yeah, I mean, I'm writing. My husband has a big backyard garden, and so, we're picking the squash and the cucumbers and zooks and figuring out what to do with them, how to cook them, and green beans, and so our life has shrunk considerably, and maybe not in a bad way, but I do miss being out in public. I really want to go to a restaurant and have someone wait on me.
I know. How about you, Christy? How have you been?
Well, all I can say is that I have been thinking about, all of the memes that have been all over Facebook and Instagram about people being stuck in the house with their husbands for that long. They need to call Delia because she really has everyone beat. I mean, forget the quarantine. No, I've been doing really well. I've been working a ton, and I don't know if everybody knows, but y'all know that I have an interior design blog called Design Chic, and Mom and I have been redoing a lot of it these past few weeks, and we're sort of doing new features, and so that's been really fun. It's been a good time to get things done, and we've just been trying to keep little Will entertained and be outside a lot, and have no complaints.
I know the little kids are a real challenge. Kristen, how are you handling that? You have a little 4-year-old, right?
Yeah, my son Noah is 4, and he's going a little stir crazy, and it doesn't help that it's so hot right now in Florida. I mean, it's hot everywhere, but it's the feels like temperature is well over 100 every day, which is not very comfortable to play outside in. But we've been finding socially distanced things to do. Like there was a rocket launch yesterday from Kennedy Space Center, which is about an hour away from us. So we drove out to the coast. We just sat in the car, so we didn't get out and expose ourselves. That sounds horrible. I never expose myself to people. Not that way.
Yeah, let's not do that.
Got dead bodies from Mary Kay. Kristen's exposing her. I'm sorry, Delia. I apologize.
We all know what you were saying. It's fun.
That's hilarious.
But in a very innocent way, we did not expose ourselves. We stayed in the car. We watched the rocket go off, and today we did a fun little science experiment with vinegar and baking soda to shoot off our own rocket in the front yard.
Oh,
so we've been trying to keep it fun.
No.
I'm so proud of you for taking that moment to teach science. Good for
Yes,
you.
it's
Awesome.
important, right?
That's awesome.
Patty, how about you?
I'm good. I feel like the beginning of all of this was so hard to focus.
Yeah.
And Delia, you said you're more accustomed to being quarantined or isolated. I just absolutely wasn't. And so the beginning was really hard. And sadly or wonderfully, I don't know, now I feel like I'm accustomed, and now I'm almost hyper focused, you know, and part of that's our morning writing, but I feel like you said, Mary Kay, that things are getting small, like it's kind of pulling in, and I'm more focused and with the family and working, and just the sheer not unpacking and repacking, right?
Yes.
Oh, the book
Yes.
tour.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
I think we're all feeling that. At first we were all
Mhm.
panicked about not having book tour, and now we're all sort of adjusting to, my gosh, it's the first summer home in a long time.
Yeah.
I was
doing it.
I'm not having another book tour.
You're supposed to be in Europe now, aren't you?
I'd be home by now, but yes, I missed my European tour. But frankly, I was so exhausted that I hope to do some of it later, and I do hate to miss it, but I was tired.
Yeah.
So I was
I'm
fine.
actually was supposed to be in Europe right now. I was supposed to be in Oxford next week, getting ready to
Ooh.
go. And I cried when they canceled it. And now I'm thinking, I can't imagine if I was leaving. And
Yeah.
so I think we're all shifting. I also think because we thought it was going to get better and now it's getting worse, we realize we're
I
in
never
this.
thought it was going to get better.
Really?
No, the only reason it was getting better was because we were isolating. As soon as we came out of isolation, it was going to get worse again unless we were very, very careful.
And it did.
We can't open up until we're going to be very, very careful.
So it looks like we'll all be checking in with each other next week about how we're continuing our isolation. So as you all know, Friends in Fiction is a passionate supporter of independent booksellers. And each week we highlight one independent. And tonight, Delia chose Malaprops Books in Asheville, North Carolina. And Malaprops is graciously giving all of you 10% off the price of Delia Owens' books, as well as the recent titles from all of us. So use the code FRIENDS to get your 10% discount. And the link to the bookstore is posted on our Friends and Fiction page. So we're going to start tonight with some questions for our guest. And I'd like to go first. So Delia, the world knows you are the author of Where the Crawdads Sing, but perhaps not everyone knows all your nonfiction books. I've read them and I'm swept up by your signature lyrical writing and the beautiful detailed description. And this is unusual, but I'd like to give our listeners just a really quick peek at the opening of your narrative of Secrets of the Savannah Gift. Between the trees of the forest, amid the thorny undergrowth, under tangles of twisted twigs, is a space that is more color than place. It is a grayness painted by drooping limbs and distant branches that blur together and fade into nothingness. It is not a shadow, but a pause in the landscape, rarely noticed because our eyes touch the trees, not the emptiness on either side of them. And elephants are the color of this space. I loved that, absolutely loved that. And in this book, the Savannah, Secrets of Savannah, you introduce Gift, a baby elephant, an orphan, discovered by your camp. You describe how female elephants in a matriarchal group are there for life, but they do not accept or adopt strangers. So this young orphan was alone. She had no family, no one to touch, or as you put, to tangle trunks with. So little Gift kept her distance. She watched the females and family dynamics from afar. And you describe, without slipping into anthropomorphism, how the orphan lived on the edge of her society, never fed or nurtured by humans. I couldn't help but think of the parallel to Kaya in Where the Crawdads Sing, the marsh girl who lived and cared for herself on the fringe, never being a part of her society. A girl who longed for friends. Now, since animal behavior is fundamental to your books, can you talk a bit about how you drew on all your experiences to create this really memorable character of Kaya?
Mary Alice, you're exactly right. That's where Kaya came from. I observed mammals in the wild for all those years, and one of the facts that had the most impact on me, that fascinated me the most, is in social mammals, the groups are made up only of females. When tourists see a pride of lions on the Serengeti plains. They see females and cubs and some males. So everybody thinks it's a happy family. But the males don't live with the pride. The males come and go. The female groups stay together for all of their lives, but the males compete for the opportunity to be with the females, and they come and go. And so for mating, they spend all of their lives going from one pride to the next. And of course, this was my friends back home said to me, you had to go all the way to Africa to learn that males go from one group to the next for mating. But
or that females like to hang out with one another.
it affected me so strongly to watch these females. I would watch the female lions on the dune tops every evening, lying together with their paws over each other's faces and playing with each other's cubs. And I realized after year after year after year of watching the elephants with the female groups and the baboons that I was isolated from my troop. I was alone and I didn't have a group. And that's where the idea for my novel came from. I wanted to write a novel that would explore how much we are affected when we are isolated, when we are forced to grow up without a group. And that's where Crawdads came from.
And so Kaya was from Gift in particular, or just from overall? Was there any?
From overall. I think from overall. Gift was truly a gift. She was the only surviving calf from a herd, and so she started hanging around our camp. And we knew her for many years. In fact, it was so sad because she was all alone. And from interesting biological fact is that she had her first calf at half the age that they usually reproduce because there were no older females around. So she came into estrus sooner and had her calf. So by the time she was the age that she would have had her first calf, she had 2 calves and a grand calf. But from that, they started making their own herd. She was an orphan on her own. She had started having her offspring at a younger age. Before you knew it, she had her own little herd. And
so hopeful.
Yes.
So hopeful.
Yes. Right. That was one of the ways that nature has to combat heavy die-offs. Like poaching, is that the females start reproducing earlier and more frequently. It was fascinating, but it was also, I loved all of that, but also it's very difficult to observe.
I'm sure.
And that sort of thing. And so that was something that I had to deal with every day. But there was so much joy also every day in observing animals. I loved it. To wake up and have lions in our camp and elephants every day. I loved that.
Oh, I wish I was with you. I really do. I mean, that's like heaven for me. I can't imagine. Kristen, you had a question.
Yeah, and it actually kind of goes nicely with what you just discussed. Delia, I am such a big fan of your book. I mean, I certainly am obviously not alone in that. I've read it 3 times, and I very, very rarely read a book more than once even. So I think what kept drawing me to it was just, obviously the plot's wonderful, but just the beautiful description and the way that the setting became a character in and of itself. I mean, the marsh just completely came alive for me. And so I was curious, you talked a little bit about writing the characters in the book, but can you talk a little bit about writing the setting and how you brought that alive and you made just the physical space feel so much like an essential character in the book in and of itself?
Well, thank you for saying that. That was my goal. I wanted the marsh and the swampy areas to be a character. The nature is very much a character in this book because we talk about Mother Nature all the time, but we seldom actually treat nature like a mother. And we don't actually, most people don't go through their lives on a day-to-day basis thinking that much about nature. But we came from nature. It was our first home. And a lot of what Where the Crawdads is about is how much we can learn about human nature from nature itself. And so I wanted to have the natural background a big part of the book, so that it became obvious to people that Kaya learned from nature. She learned not only how to get food, how to fish, how to survive, but she learned about survival from nature. She learned we all have very deep instincts that are ancient, and a lot of these instincts that we have they guide us toward behavior patterns that aren't necessarily appropriate in today's world. But if you're having to survive, you need these instincts. And it's very interesting. Part of the book was a study on how close these instincts are to the surface and how they can be used when you need them. And so for all of that to work, nature had to be a big part of the book, had to be very close by, so to speak.
Mhm.
You did an incredible job with it. It's
Thank
just such a
You
beautiful.
did. Kathy, Mary Kay, you have a question.
Yeah, Delia, looking at the incredible success of this book, as a writer, one of the things I wondered was how you've been able to handle the disruption to your writing life and your personal life. And I think about Catherine Stockett after the amazing success of The Help, and how her world was upended with the glare of publicity. And I wondered how you've been able to handle that. I mean, you told us a little bit earlier, for people who are just joining us, that you're living now in the mountains of North Carolina, but how have you, and has it affected your life? Has it affected your writing life and your personal life?
Well, yes, it was very difficult to write. I was basically promoting the book for a year and a half, and so that it was very difficult to write. Also, I was traveling a lot. I think I was on 170 airplanes or something. I've forgotten.
Wow.
It was hard. But honestly, I would never even think of complaining, because I was so thrilled.
Right.
I
Yeah.
was so thrilled at the reception of this book. I was so appreciative. And also, I think because I had lived an isolated life, I met a lot of friends. I was overwhelmed with this reaction, and it just meant a lot to me. And so I came to terms with it. Although it was so hard and I got tired of traveling, I came to terms with the fact that, okay, I'm going to have to delay writing the next book a little bit longer. I mean, there were times I had my laptop out on an airplane and trying to write, but it's difficult.
Hard.
And
Yeah.
so I just postponed it a bit, and I enjoyed the ride.
You should have. We would all love a ride like that, I think.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
And the rides keeps continuing.
Keep going, but it'll slow down, and I think I might be the only person who's enjoying isolation right now.
No, actually, we were saying, Delia, that for some of us, our life hasn't changed all that much. I mean, we're not going on book tour, but isolation is definitely, part of the writer's life. Certainly, at least mine. I think I speak for most of us, though, that we spend a lot of time alone, and me with animals, and I enjoy that. So it's not that different.
Writing is a solitary sport, and right now we're in isolation. It's a good time to write from some points of view.
Patty, I see you there. Hi, Patty. How about your question? I know you have one.
I do. So Delia, I think when I discovered, which I didn't discover till after I'd read your book, and of course loved it, like everyone here did. And because I'm in the low country of South Carolina a lot, the marsh, the descriptions, I just was like, I'm going to stop even trying to describe this. You did such an amazing job. But when I discovered that you had written all this nonfiction, I was already a little envious, and then I kind of doubled down on my envy because most of us can do one or the other, right? Like most people write either nonfiction or nonfiction narrative, or they write fiction, and you somehow managed to do both. And I'm curious about that transition for you, the transition from nonfiction to fiction. Was it deliberate? Did you go into this with an idea of, I want to tell a story with a very particular theme? Or did you go into it with the image of your character in your hand? Or like, what was the impetus for the transition? Was it more thematic, or was it that this young girl just came to you? I'm so curious about that transition.
Well, the nonfiction books from Africa, of course, had to be nonfiction because they were the stories of our lives there. And to me, writing nonfiction is, first of all, we wrote our nonfiction books with a very strong beginning, middle, and end. We told them in story form, so they were more like fiction than some nonfiction books. They weren't just accounts of our observations. We wrote them in story form. So I felt like I had a little bit of experience with the format of fiction. And but I wanted to write fiction because I felt like I could reach more people. I had this burning desire to tell this story. I felt like this was a story that so many people needed to hear, to try to understand where we came from and why we feel the way we do. And I wanted to reach people. And writing nonfiction natural history books is sort of the bottom of the feeding chain. You know, I mean, Cry the Kalahari was a bestseller, but in that category, it just doesn't sell very many books. And I don't mean that I just wanted to reach people. I wanted Kaya to find her way into a lot of people's hearts because I had something I wanted to say. And there are a lot of things you can say in fiction that you can't say in nonfiction. And actually, I love the transition. I've described it before, but to me, writing nonfiction, I've ridden horses a lot in my life, and writing nonfiction is like riding your horse inside of a corral because you have to stay within the facts. You can't just, if there's a character you want to change or a timeline, you can't. You have to stay with the facts. And then writing fiction is like riding your horse through the gate and going wherever you want to go. The only limitation is your own imagination. And if you want a guy to be cuter, you make him cuter. If you want something else to happen, if you want to, so it's the freedom of writing fiction. I loved it. My imagination soared, sometimes a little bit too high, but I just found it exhilarating to write fiction.
Did you feel like
sorry.
Did you feel like you had, you know, I started my life, and two of the other women here on Friends in Fiction also started their careers as journalists. And I know when I started writing fiction, I felt like I had been given permission to tell just the wildest lies. And the first book I wrote, I told in first person because, you know, in journalism, you're not allowed to do that. And then I also put in a lot of bad words because
You could.
Storing them up for all those years.
You write about sex in nonfiction, it's your own life, you know. It's like
Yeah, no.
Yeah, I just was so curious, and you answered it, whether it was this burning story that needed to get out or whether you just wanted to try.
no, I had this burning story.
That's amazing.
I
That's
wanted
why
to
it
tell
feels like
this.
that. Yeah, it feels like that.
But I think what's really interesting, Delia, is, and why I wanted to read that excerpt that was from your nonfiction. To me, we've all read a lot of nonfiction for research, and a lot of it is pretty cut and dry. But I think what I wanted to show is that your beautiful lyricism is there in your nonfiction as well. It does read like a story. I mean, I've read them all, and they're all just really beautiful books.
Thank you. You know, it's interesting to me to think about, it's almost, and correct me if I'm wrong, because this is just something I've been thinking about lately. it's almost like descriptive writing has become a dirty word in literature. I mean, we live in such a fast-paced world, and as you all know, probably much better than I, that literature evolves with our current lifestyles and our culture. And you know, when we lived in the Kalahari, sometimes we'd only get our mail once every 6 months.
What?
Yes.
Wow.
If I want to download something and it says it's going to take 60 seconds, I go, 60 seconds? Why is it going to take 60 seconds? You know, we're also impatient now, and we want everything right now. And so description, we all know you can't have too much description. It's like too much sugar in your tea, but it's also
I like that.
current literature. People don't want to read, they want to get to the point really fast. So for the last 20, 30 years, I don't know, it's like there's less and less description. And I think description is great as long as it moves the story forward. I think it's great if it sets the reader in place and helps them smell and see and feel like they're there. So I think you have to be very careful. But do you agree with me? I mean, I just feel like that there's sort of discrimination against description right now.
Well, I can't write a novel without it. They're characters in my books, and you know, because of the nature factor. And I think it does depend on what kind of a book you're writing too. But I think certainly when landscape is so critical to the story to move it forward, absolutely you can't. But there's a difference between writing fiction description where you are just saying the tree is green and the water's blue. It's you look at it, you know, you use it, and I think good writing is when the description is from the point of view of the characters and it imbues emotion.
Yes, that's the whole point. Is some of words, the right words, not how many words, but the right words, so that I call them zingers, a word that springs a picture into the reader's mind.
But
It
you know
gives you that flutter in your heart.
Well, Christy, I'm going to go to you because I know you have a question about poetry, and I think that is the key of poetry, is how every word sings. So
yeah,
Christy,
speaking of the flutter in your heart, that was a really good segue. So I absolutely love the poetry in Crawdads, and Mary Alice and I were discussing before you came on that as we were reading the book, we both thought that this was a real poet, and you know, we're going to go look for this poetry. And I was thinking, how have I never heard of this poet? I am so dense. This is so interesting. So I have sort of a multi-part question, but you did write the poetry in the book, is that correct?
I wrote the poetry, all the poetry of Amanda Hamilton. That I did quote a few real poets.
Sure.
but Amanda Hamilton.
Yes, but Amanda Hamilton was your poetry. So it was absolutely beautiful. You did such a great job with that. And did you always know that was going to be an important aspect of the story, or was that something that sort of unveiled itself to you as you were writing?
I came up with that idea very early. In fact, when I was still just planning the story, I thought it would be so fun. And I have to be very careful here about not giving spoilers. But I mean, there's a reason that the poetry is in there, and part of the plot. And so I can't say too much. I mean, we try not to give spoilers here, right? Or are we not careful?
Yes.
Yeah.
Although I don't know who hasn't read your book.
Yeah,
That's true. Exactly.
Who hasn't read the book? I mean,
Oh, no spoiler.
I thought it would be so fun to put the poetry in there and have it be part of the plot in a way, the way it turned out to be.
And it did. It did enhance the novel. And honestly, I wanted to buy Amanda Hamilton's book when it was over.
You
So
should
publish
release
your
a little-
poetry.
Yeah, it was wonderful. It really was.
Thank you very much. I always wanted to go back and have another chance to sort of edit, fine tune the poetry a little bit better. And I never got around to it.
Beautiful.
No, it's
Just the
perfect.
way It
It was
is.
perfect.
So did we all ask questions? I just want to make sure.
Yes.
I thought so. All right. So we're going to just take a moment to highlight our bookstore. So it continues to be a tough time for all locally owned bookstores. And as people who love books, as we all do, we want to try to encourage people to support their local bookstores. So if you're interested in picking up one of our new releases tonight, so Delia's Where the Crawdads Sing and all the nonfiction books, Cry the Kalahari, Secret of the Savannah, and Eye of the Elephant, my On Ocean Boulevard, Christie's Feels Like Falling, Mary Kay's Hello Summer, and Patty's Becoming Mrs. Lewis, and Kristen's upcoming very soon, The Book of Lost Names. Please take advantage of the great 10% discount right now offered by Malaprops Books. The code is FRIENDS, and the link to the bookstore is on our Friends and Fiction page. So we've had a chance to ask some questions for Delia. Patty, would you like to ask Delia the reader questions?
So we stole these off our feed, and if we asked all the questions that people put on that feed, we'd be here tomorrow morning still. People are so excited about talking to you, and so these had to be chosen randomly because there were so many great questions. But the first one is from Mary Lynn Seddon Aquino. Why did we pick someone with the last 7 names? I bet I said all of those wrong. She said, my question is this. This novel has to be made into a movie, I hope. Who do you see in the role of Kaya?
Well, first of all, it is going to be made into a movie. Is the producer, and it's being the studio is Sony, and the screenplay has been written. They're choosing directors now, and you know, this is embarrassing, but I appreciate the question. I never get to go to a movie, and I don't know any young actresses. I need to learn some, and so I can say it when people ask this question. I really don't know who would be appropriate. So I'm sure they'll choose someone great, but with some of the book signings, people have asked me who I thought should play Tate, you know, the really cute guy. And I said, I'm sorry, it's been so long since I've been in the movie. I have no idea. And the last person I know who would be appropriate would be Robert Redford.
I
think he still holds up.
He might have aged out for Tate.
Yeah. I just don't know the young actors, but thank you for the question.
So how about you girls? Who do you
guys think?
Yeah, who do you see as Kaya?
Oh, I'm so bad at casting.
I'm so bad too. But I do want to say really quickly, because I do think we're going to have time for a couple of questions live from the feed. So I am sitting here watching y'all's comments come in. So if you have questions, ask them now so that I can pull them up for you. But I'm bad at Hollywood. I'm bad.
Yeah.
Delia, do you know who or when the movie's expected to come out? Do you have any target dates?
No, but they want to move along very quickly. They're already talking about places to film and that sort of thing anywhere along the coast, whether it might not be in North Carolina, might be South Carolina or Georgia. A lot of the marsh is the same throughout that area. And I know they want to get started right away, but of course, also with the virus, that could complicate filming as well.
All right, so the next question is from Ashley Curran. Crawdads was such a huge hit. Yep. When will your next book come out?
My next book, well, I am writing my next book. I told Mary Alice the other day, I was thrilled. She's helped me so much with the importance of the first draft. And I have finished the first draft.
Awesome.
And
So envious.
Step, because I feel like I don't have a canvas until I have the first draft. And it took me so long because of all that traveling. And I'm thankful that I did work some during that time, or otherwise I would have finished my tour and been starting at scratch. Instead, I had, quite a bit done. But I have the first draft now, and I'm going to, so I hate to say when it's going to come out. I just don't know, but it will be a while. But I'm working on it every day, and I'm going to do it as soon as I can, but I don't like to rush. I'm going to take my time. It's going to be modeled after Crawdads in the sense it's going to be another treatise on how our behavior came from nature. And the theme of this book is going to be exploring the evolution of male dominance in mammals.
Oh.
And
I'm first in line for that.
in most mammals, the males are dominant. And we can go back in evolutionary time and know when and why that happened, which I think is fascinating. So that's part of the story.
I can hardly wait.
And there's only one, there are not many, but one, there are very, very few. But one of the few mammals in which the females are dominant are spotted hyenas. My friend said, you know, wonder they're always laughing.
Love that.
Very
Oh,
flattering.
please bring that in. You've got to somehow weave that in.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Oh, Christy, can you pull out 2 questions from the line?
Yes, I can. Okay, so the first one, Leisha Haney wants to know, do you have conversations with your book characters?
I wonder if you mean like currently you mean as I'm writing or as I'm walking around the house? I mean, I feel very much like I know them. I know them very well. They're very personal to me. I can't say that I've had actual conversations with them. I'd love to have a conversation with Tate.
I would too.
No, I don't feel like but I feel like I know them very well.
Gotcha.
We're almost too close. We don't need to talk.
You just have that mind meld together.
Exactly.
That's great.
There's that joke that they, go ahead. Go ahead, Christy.
Sorry, go ahead, Mary Alice.
I was just going to say, there's that joke that people think writers are schizophrenic because we're always talking to these people in our head. But go ahead, Kristen.
Yes. Somebody once asked me at a book event if I thought I had like a problem. And I was like, well, if I do, I need it to not stop because I will not have a career anymore. Wendy Page wants to know, and I don't know if you can answer this, but she wants to know, why did Kaya live her life and not have children?
Okay, that's a good question. The main reason from a plot perspective is that the point of her life was to show how isolation affects us. If she had had a child, that changes that. And so I thought it was important for the plot for her to be, the story to be complete, that she did live that life of isolation.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's very good. I never thought of that, but that makes sense now. Yeah.
Also, I'm sure you all understand very well that you can't have too many things happening at the end. And
Right.
there are a lot of things that happened at the end of this book.
Yes.
Bang, 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 bang. You know, baby, no, that would have just been one step.
Just like one more thing. One more thing. Anissa Joy Armstrong wants to know, if you could be any of the characters from Crawdads, who would you be and why?
Well, it's a great question. Yeah.
Oh, well, I feel like I am Kaya in a way.
Mhm.
I think that there's a lot of me in Kaya, but I think there's a lot of Kaya in all of us. So I think it would have to, the answer to that would be Kaya. And I know that she had a hard life, but I don't know anybody who's had an easy life. And I just think that she shows us we could do so much more than we think we can. She was so strong and powerful against so many different odds. And I love that. So yes, I'll be Kaya.
Okay. We'll all be Kaya. We'll have a
We're
Kaya.
all Kaya.
A Kaya convention. Yeah.
Well, she was so strong, and she was like Gibbs. She created her own herd, so to speak,
She did.
and she survived. So that's very cool. Anyone else have any questions? Do we have any more questions before we move on to the writing tip? Christy, are there any more that you want to pull?
I mean, we can do as many as you want to. So
Let's
you
pull one
want me to
more.
ask one more? Okay, perfect. Melanie Stickler Falconer wants to know, what do you like to read when you're not writing?
You know, I read a lot more nonfiction than fiction, to be really honest. And so I love books like Peter Matheson, The Snow Leopard, Beryl Markham, West with the Night, Aldo Leopold. I love to read nature books that Annie Dillard that are, I love a good novel, but I just read a lot of nonfiction, I actually read a lot of science related journals and so forth. So that's mainly what I read. To answer your question, that's what I like to read.
And that actually ties in with your research for the book that you're writing too. So it all goes hand in hand. All right. I think we've had enough of the questions. Thank you all to everyone out there who had questions. Delia, if you'd like to join us on Friends in Fiction page, there are a gazillion questions that you can just freely answer anytime. And I'm sure everyone would love it. Now, every week we have a writing tip. Now, I have to say, you've already given us any number of writing tips. But let me ask you, for all the viewers out there who are interested in learning how to write or just wanting to hear, what is your writing tip?
This is sort of an odd one, but my writing tip is that I always stay very conscious of the reader. Sometimes I almost, and not literally very often, but imagine the reader sitting next to me. And every paragraph I write, almost every sentence, I'm always saying, okay, am I boring the reader? I do not want to bore the reader. I do not want to confuse the reader. I do not want to insult the reader by over-explaining something. And so I really think about the reader a lot. And it terrifies me. I sometimes I'll go on 3 paragraphs or something. I'll think, oh no. Nobody's going to really want to read this. I'm boring my reader. And so I don't know why, but that works for me to really feel strongly and feel the reader close by.
Are you conscious of that during your first draft as well?
Yeah. Oh yes.
Wow.
Very much so.
That's great.
And that's getting a lot of trouble in the first draft with the reader, a lot of trouble. It's so interesting because there's some things, people don't think about this, but there's some things the reader doesn't want to read and the writer doesn't want to write, like background stuff. Yeah, okay, here's this family in the marsh. And how did they get there? Well, how did they actually get in the marsh? Well, the reader needs to know that, but they don't want to know, they don't want 3 pages of background on how they got there. They just want to know how it happened.
Yeah.
So certain things you have to answer and you have to write it, but you realize nobody really wants to read it. And so I don't like that part. But so I'm always keeping the reader very much in my mind when it comes to writing that part of it.
Great tip.
Does that count as a tip?
It sure does. And it's different than what we've heard before.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's a really good tip.
We're all thinking.
Yes. I was gonna say, I feel like those are the parts in the book that I tend to like skip over and like make myself a note, like explain how blah, blah, blah. Cause I don't want to talk about it. Nobody wants to read it. It's like the stuff that you're just like, it's a necessary part of the story, but it's not inspiring in that moment.
Yeah.
And that's hard with the description in particular, I think, to know when's too much and when's enough.
It really is. Sometimes you have to have someone else tell you, and there's always somebody to tell you.
Oh yeah. They will let you know.
Thank you. That was a great tip. All right. Mary Kay, I'm curious. We always like to know what we're all reading. We heard from you, Delia. So Mary Kay, what have you been reading lately that you'd like to tell us?
I have been reading this great book. It's called The Sweeney Sisters by Leanne Dolan. And it's a book about, the story is about 3 sisters. Their father is a very famous novelist, and he passes away unexpectedly, and they discover right at the funeral, and there are 3 sisters, but at the funeral, or I'm close to getting to the funeral, they discover there's a 4th Sweeney sister. So I think, I've had sisters, a lot of us have sisters, and so far it moves. I love it, and it's Leanne Dolan, Dolan, Lian, The Sweeney Sisters, and I'm really enjoying it.
And I think a couple other people had some books they wanted to mention. Kristen, you had a book.
Yeah, so this is called Lake Life. It's by David James Poissant. I know my light shining on it, but it comes out next week, and it's just a really lyrical, beautiful novel about a family in crisis over the course of a single weekend at their North Carolina lake house. So it's actually a debut novel. The author is an acclaimed short story writer, and he had a wonderful collection of short stories a few years ago. But this is his first novel, Lake Life, David James Poissant, out next week, and it's fantastic.
Thank you. And we'll be sure to post the titles of those books on the Friends and Fiction page, as well as I'll put the titles of all the nonfiction of Delia up on our Friends and Fiction page, so you can all follow up on this if you go to our page. And I hope all of you out there do join our Friends and Fiction page. We have a show every week, Wednesday night at 7 o'clock, and we hope you'll join us. All right, speaking of which, we have an amazing roster of authors coming to Friends and Fiction. Kristen, you're the host next week. Can you let us know about your guest?
I'm actually hosting the next guest episode, which is not till July 15th. Next week, I think, is a Just Us episode.
Just Us.
Which,
that's a
yeah,
fun.
which I think
Those
Mary
are
Kay, are you hosting that one? I can't remember. I need to look back at the schedule. Well, you know, all of you out there, if you're new to us, if you're new to Friends and Fiction, definitely come back next week. It's a great chance to know the 5 of us who founded Friends and Fiction back in April. You know, we've been going strong. We've been doing this every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Eastern. And then on July 15th, the week after next, we have Jasmine Guillory, whose Party of Two just came out last week and debuted at number 8 on the New York Times list today.
Oh, Jasmine!
Yay,
You really? Oh,
amazing.
congratulations,
That's
Jasmine.
so great. And then the week after
Yeah.
that, July 22nd, we have Ken and Drew from the platinum selling band Sister Hazel, who have more than 3 million albums sold and who are going to talk to us about storytelling and songwriting. And they might even sing for us, which would be great.
I hope so.
I mean, that's a first for us.
Can we put in song requests?
Exactly.
But wait, Kristen is not mentioning something, because the important thing about that episode is that the book is going to be out on that day. It's going to be birthday time.
Which I handily have right here, the Book of Lost Names. Thank you. That's nice of you to
Very
mention.
exciting. So next week with the Just Us, it's always a lot of fun, because that's when we get to just talk amongst ourselves, as they say. But I have to say, Delia, this wasn't so hard, was it, to join this crazy group of strong females?
This was wonderful. This was great. I really feel like I'm in the middle of I don't know, maybe a hyena clan.
We do not want to be hyenas. We could be anything else. How about a pride of
To be
lions?
a crowd of lions.
We liked the crickets better.
Okay, I love hyenas, but anyway, so lions, elephants, you were a great herd. It was wonderful.
Oh, thank you. Well, pretty much we have
Thank you. I really appreciate you having me. It was so great to get to know you a bit better, and it was a lot of fun. Thank
well,
you.
one of the things I wanted to tell our viewers, this was Delia's first Zoom appearance.
Yes, this is my first time on Zoom. I was so scared.
And you did perfectly. Wonderful.
Says the woman, I was so scared, says the woman who lived alone in Africa. Okay.
Great to Zoom.
Did it come on, and I don't know, but we did it.
You're amazing. You're amazing.
Amazing.
We want one final thing before everybody goes. We want to remind you to, if you haven't already, follow all of us on Instagram, where you can see, get a glimpse into our lives, what we're doing, what we're writing, what we're growing.
What we're redecorating, what we're...
Yes, all of those things, and what we're reading. We talk about that too. So the links to all of our Instagram pages are up on the Friends and Fiction site. So if you haven't already, please start following us.
Delia, you
That's
have
where
an
we
Instagram.
announce the next.
I have an Instagram. Yes, I do.
Yeah, you have Instagram.
Oh, good. We'll follow you.
Yes, please.
Right.
Are you looking at bears in the North Carolina mountains, Delia?
The bears are looking at me, and I'm looking at the bears. There's a lot of bears here. I had one who stayed the winter in a tree den, seriously 20 yards from my deck all winter.
Wow.
One of the things that's so great about your deck, though, is you can see from so far over on the mountains. And there was a red-tailed hawk that literally just dove down right beside my head and went down. Do you remember? That was,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
you're way up. You're like in a tree house, which is super cool.
That's awesome.
So the mountains are a safe place to be during all this.
Right
Well,
now.
that's our program for tonight, everybody. Delia, you are a joy. I mean, I've been holding back because there's so many things I want to talk to you about. You just have such a wealth of knowledge and information. And the way you look at the world is so fascinating, which I think is why your books are so beautiful. So I hope everyone tonight will order Where the Crawdads Sing and go to Malaprops Books, which is in Asheville, a wonderful bookstore, and they're offering you a 10% discount on all Delia's books, as well as the books of all of us. And remember, we want to support our independent bookstores. They're having a tough time, just like a lot of small businesses, and we want to support them. And visit us on our Friends in Fiction page. It's a group page on Facebook and our Instagram pages. And thanks to all of you for joining us. This is Friends in Fiction, and we will see you right here next Wednesday night at 7 o'clock. Much love to all. Good night.
Thank you, Delia.
Delia, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Delia.
Thank you.
Good night.
Okay, so you have to hit the little leave. Okay.
Okay. Okay. How wonderful was that?
She was
That was amazing.
She was so great. Yeah.
She was
that was
Just
so
the way
great.
she sees the world, it all brings all that experience in. It's just,
Yeah.
Wow, it's
Yeah.
fascinating.
You can see why she wrote about Kaya.
Yeah.
You hear about how she lived. It just makes so much sense because when you're
Yeah.
reading it the first time, you're like, a girl alone in the marsh. Why would you write about that? But once you hear about how she lived
right. Her,
6
her
months to get her mail, we're talking
Oh my gosh.
isolation. That's
Yeah, that's serious isolation. I
When
I
she
would
was
not do well with that.
when she was talking about matriarchal societies, I was thinking about, I used to love the Tony Hillerman novels, which are about the Navajos, and they have a matriarchal society.
Mhm.
Everything about the Navajos is traced down through the matriarchal lineage, and I thought, wow, that's kind of interesting. There aren't many
That is interesting.
Western societies that roll that way.
No, not at all.
And you know, when I thought about, I remember with Kaya, when I first started reading it, I actually had to suspend my belief, like you, Patty, where I thought, come on, an 8-year-old, really? 9-year-old? And then I read her history and I thought, okay, I can believe this. But when I was reading this Secrets of the Savannah and I heard about that little gift, my inclination was to, oh, feed that baby. Take care of that little baby elephant. But in nature, you have to let it roll out the way nature would demand. And she did. That had to have been so hard. Not
That's
just
what I do with my 22-year-old. Listen, I'm not going to feed you anymore just because you're in the house.
Roll out. Yeah.
You feed me,
know.
it's your turn. No, I actually read it and I remember people being like, I mean, how could I think she was 6, like when this like first started and maybe her mother left. And I remember thinking, I think little Will was 6 at the time. And I was like, I can actually see him kind of surviving in the wild. I think he's doing pretty well.
my grandson can't even take off his swimsuit by himself, and he's 4.
He's always been very like, he builds things and he just knows things. And I don't know, it's just, and I was like, he'd probably do all right.
But I think
let's not find out. But yeah.
Let's not find out, please. Yes.
I'm so glad you brought up, Christy, about the poetry.
Oh, yes. Thank you for that plug. That was such a great question. And I did love it. And that was so funny that we both thought that was a real poet because I really did. And I was like, wow, this is so great. I need to buy a book of this woman's poetry.
I know. And I always think that poetry is one of the highest forms of writing because, you know, each word is so important. And when I read that, I just thought, wow, who is this beautiful writer? And of course, I mean, she's just, and when you read the nonfiction, it's just That's why I wanted to do that.
That's a real triple threat. I mean, can you guys write poetry? Are you poets? I know you can, Patty. I know you're laughing. I know you can write poetry. I firmly disagree.
Because of where the Crawdads sing, I write some poetry, not a lot. I'm not a lot, but I've always been really shy about it. And because we know Marjorie Wentworth, who's a brilliant poet, and I put a poem in the front of On Ocean Boulevard, and it's the first time I ever did that. I was shaking in my boots. I'll be honest with you. It's scary. It is something totally different.
It's different.
I can tell
Mary
you,
Kay?
I read poetry every day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Patty's a great poetry. I don't know. I think unfortunately a lot of us, maybe not Patty, but a lot of us, I think over the years, lose our thirst for poetry. The day-to-day details of everyday life, I think, kind of wring that out of us. But I know for myself, when I do go back to poetry, I remember in high school, I loved poetry.
Mm-hmm.
Loved it.
I find
William Carlos
poetry has been
Williams, I loved it.
I have found poetry to be a saving grace for me during this pandemic. I start every morning, and I've been living with my sisters and my husband up at the mountain house, and we start every morning by reading. Each of us reads a poem, and it just elevates the day. It just brings it to another level. And I think maybe anything we can find that elevates our spirits during this time is important.
I just write fake song lyrics, if you'll all recall, from Mary
That'll work.
Christie's.
Which were so good.
That'll work.
And if you were here last week, you know that I dream about them because I'm writing songs with James Taylor in my dreams. So, I mean, I don't know that I can actually write them, but in my dreams, I write killer songs in my own head.
Christy, that's the Chapel Hill connection, I think, with James Taylor.
Mm-hmm. It must be.
His father was head of the med school at Chapel Hill?
Wow.
Yeah, that's a great book. If you guys, if anybody out there hasn't listened to it, he has a new Audible original out. I can't remember what it's called, but I listened to it like the day it came out.
I did too.
It was wonderful.
That was one of the first concerts I ever went to. I don't want to say how long ago it was, but I will say that James Taylor was touring on Sweet Baby James.
Wow.
And the warm-up act was a woman no one had ever heard of called Carole King.
Carole King, yeah.
Whatever happened to her? Nobody. Yeah.
Claiming that she had written Respect. And Tapestry had not yet been released. So that's my rock concert, moment of glory.
That was actually one of the first concerts that I ever went to also was James Taylor. I mean, that's a career.
40 years later.
Well, but I'm just saying, like, that is a career. I mean, to be able to sustain that kind of success. I mean, it's like where the Crawdads sing.
Yeah, right.
I mean, can you imagine having written your very first book and have that kind of response? I mean, it's almost, I would think, be daunting to write your second. I think Margaret Mitchell, Patty, you studied her. You don't know her, but you studied her. She never chose, you're not that old. She never wrote another novel. Did she ever just describe why? And Harper Lee never wrote another book.
Well, Harper Lee had started another one. And
did she?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. She had, there is a book about it that came out last year, and now I can't think what it was. Yeah, she had started working on another novel inspired by a true crime story, and the book that came out last year. Patty, do you know?
It came out last year, and it was
Ghost Had a Watchman.
Research she did.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Well, the Watchman was different.
No,
That was
no.
Atticus.
No, there's a nonfiction book about the true crime story she wanted to write, right?
Yeah, but I think, and Margaret Mitchell said that the reason she couldn't write was because she was too busy keeping up with her correspondence.
Right.
The letters were, and then of course she was hit by a cab and killed before she could write another book. It's the terriblest ending ever. But she just said that book took over her life. Between her and her husband, all they did was answer correspondence and deal with foreign rights and all of that. And she could never write again.
Wow.
In that period of time, though, Gone with the Wind was sort of like Where the Crawdads Sing. It just hit the world by storm.
Yeah.
So that makes sense. Well, on that note, ladies, I know we all have dinner waiting. Thank you.
So hungry. Good night.
Love to see you. Yeah.
I think that what'll be a great Just Us question is what everybody's first concert was. So we're going to save that.
All
Oh my
right.
God, I'm embarrassed. Do I have to
I'm
tell?
so embarrassed.
I'm not going to tell you that. Whoever's in charge next week has to ask.
Oh, who?
Okay. That's a good
Kathy,
one.
are you the host next week?
I think it's okay. Yeah.
I think I am. All right, ladies. Good night, everybody.
Good night,
Hey,
y'all.
that was great. Thanks,
Love y'all.
everyone.
See you in the morning.
Bright and early. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.